Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is May the 4th, and of course we want to say May the 4th be with you there in case you're one of those fans. We'll just leave it there. Weather.gov/Alaska is a place to go with all of your weather information, forced or not. You can always have the latest satellite and radar imagery as well as local weather observations and, of course, your forecast for your part of Alaska there all the time. 800-472-0391, whether you're a Padawan learner or not. NWS Alaska is on Facebook, on Twitter, on AKwx, and, of course, YouTube at NWS Anchorage is a place to go for the daily afternoon radio briefing that'll give you an audio video version of what you'll see here later on the show. It's almost about knowing the future, the past, old weather friends long gone, that kind of stuff. You can see all that information there if you want. All right, the breakup map now. Let's get into serious mode here. Mushing out. Things are mushed out across the Yukon and going quickly. You can see all the way from tip to tail just about. The Yukon's almost done. Look at that. In fact, not expecting to have a lower Yukon River watch as a result because it is almost there. There's a few places that are still mostly ice. You can see those just south of Galena. But it looks like a lot of improvements there just in the last 24 hours. The northern slope rivers, including the Colville, still showing mostly ice, but even some of that is beginning to change as you look out toward the Kotzebue Sound region and eastward. So a lot of improvements to come, especially in the north, but a lot of improvements and lower danger, of course, down south, as it was foretold, as if we had some Jedi Masters telling us what was coming. Maybe Yoda actually works in the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. That's what Selena Van Breukelen told us when she visited us the show a couple of weeks ago. She said, a mush out, low threat, and here we are. So pretty cool stuff to see how that's been playing out. But it looks like things are improving there across the Yukon and certainly already there for the Kuskokwim and more to come for the North Slope. As always, we're not done yet. And so I will remind you that you can communicate with us. You don't have to use the force and hope we get the message. Make sure we do by going to Facebook at NWS Alaska, on Twitter, NWS APRFC, that's Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, 1-800-847-1739 is the phone number, or email nws.ar.aprfc@noaa.gov, the website there for the breakup map, flood potential, and just regular old river forecast for where you are. Weather.gov/APRFC is a place to be there. On to the satellite picture. The visible satellite picture shows us low pressure that's dampening out or weakening as it moves northward toward the north and eastern Gulf. This is not the big slug of moisture just yet. This is kind of a little spin up that's moved out ahead of it. Out to the east, we have much drier air across southeast. There have been a few pockets of light rainfall, mainly showers there across the inside waters. That's also not a big deal compared to what's coming. You can see, look at all this bright white down across the southern and western Gulf. That's what's on the way and moving north and eastward quickly. In the next 24 hours, it should be right about here. Out across the west and the interior, all the rough kind of texture clouds, those are convective clouds, clouds that have bubbled up in the heat of the day, and it is fairly warm out there, temps in the 50s for many locations. Look at that. You can see it just exploding across the Kuskokwim and the lower and middle Yukon, all the way to areas in the upper Yukon, Fort Yukon to Arctic Village. Saw a lot of that. And with that comes showers and thunderstorms. A little bit of a different texture out across the Bering. The smooth clouds you see are stratus, and low clouds, whether that be fog or stratus, And all that's gently drifting to the south and west as high pressure up across the north is forcing those cooler northerly winds down into low pressure that is well south of the Aleutians at this point. Take a look at the infrared satellite picture and you can see the overall motion there in the Bering Sea, again generally north to south. Up north we still have our low cloud deck there and cold air situated across the Arctic coast. Most areas we're looking at temperatures in the 20s today. Just south of the Brooks Range, though, completely different weather picture. 50s, maybe even a few 60s there. 40s and 50s across the southern coast, and mild across southeast with temperatures there in the 50s. Now, as we get wetter weather moving northward, again, that surge of wetter air will move into low pressure quickly, push northward into the north and eastern Gulf thanks to the jet stream orienting itself more from a southwest to northeasterly direction. And that's going to persist as we head into Thursday, Friday, probably Saturday, and maybe in some cases Sunday as that drifts a little bit more to the east. After that, perhaps some areas in the interior and south central will get a little bit of the ridge that's moving out from the west. That could redevelop or strengthen across some parts of the central, south central, and southeastern locations. Here's a look at today's weather map now. There's still enough cool air there. You could have drawn this as a trough of low pressure. It is a boundary or a separation of much different weather on either side of the Brooks Range. Is it a true cold front? Well, it probably has to move. So, you know, we could have a nice discussion on that. Just south of that, though, showers and thunderstorms have been popping up, so sort of acting like a cold front a little bit. Showers across the Yukon Valley all the way southward, and more of that was developing as I was finishing up making the map for you. We were starting to see some development here across southwest, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some showers and storms develop there. Across south central, the low pressure system is relatively weak, but it's enough to kind of slop up some of the moisture into Prince William Sound and southeastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula, and then spotty areas of light rainfall there under the ridge of high pressure extending all the way from the Pacific Northwest into southeastern Alaska. Now, here's the taste of what's to come already on the southern part of the map. High pressure out across the western Bering at 1,026 millibars, feeding in cold air on the backside of this. Watch how fast the system moves. By tonight, it's moving into the Gulf with that warmer and wetter air drifting north. Stronger northeasterly winds start to form south of Sand Point to Kodiak Island. And gradually overnight, that wind comes up. Looking further northward, there's still enough cold air lingering there for a few snow showers, but by and large, most parts of Alaska, if you're seeing precipitation, it looks like it's going to be in liquid form. Maybe a little mixing there from Mamaroneck out toward Nunivak Island and the Yukon Delta. A few rain and snow showers for the central and eastern Aleutians, and wham! The jet stream grabs that surface system and pushes it into the Gulf Coast. The triple dots here mean more than rain, it means heavy rain, and it looks like that's an opportunity from Prince William Sound all the way to Yakutat, maybe into parts of Cross Sound. Over the next couple days, we'll be watching this area here. It's not uncommon to see some heavy precipitation, but it looks like it is setting up in this case for sure. High pressure south of southeastern Alaska will linger for a little while longer at 1,025 millibars. That's feeding into the system, blowing in that warm and wet air northward. We'll get a drier patch on the north side, in this case the lee side of the Alaska Range. So places like Healy and maybe as far north as Fairbanks will be relatively dry and mild. But then that leads into another area of showers and thunderstorms setting up along the Yukon Valley all the way from west to east. Northward looks like things might clear up a little bit across the north slope there, so maybe some more sunshine headed your way. Another system's coming in behind that too, don't miss that. That's at 988 millibars out across the western Bering. But in between is this ridge of high pressure, a little bit of no man's land, but it is a little bit calmer and more clear, more stable, of course. That's why we might get some morning fog with that. But if the ridge can help push this out of the way, well, things might quiet down a little bit and certainly warm up across south central and southeast. Cool mornings and warm afternoons would follow that if things set up in the right time. Now, showers and thunderstorms, though, for Friday, especially in the interior, look to be a little more likely as low pressure lurks in the western Gulf. Periods of moderate to occasionally heavy rain are still possible in the north and eastern Gulf. And then our front moving across the eastern Gulf will redevelop rain across a large part of southeastern Alaska. This front will probably die off fairly quickly. Notice our ridge is still here as well, and that's holding back this weather system from just moving through in a progressive and timely manner. So we'll see what happens and how long this system lurks around the interior and south central and southeastern Alaska, especially with another one hot on its heels heading into Friday and Saturday. In the meantime, southeast temperatures today in the 40s and 50s around the capital city is about 46 degrees. Down toward Haida Gwaii, don't talk about those folks there very much, but temps are in the lower 50s on the other side of the entrance. A little bit further up the coast into Alaskaville, we get to about 55 around Klawock and Craig, 47 around Ketchikan today. Hyder and Stewart closer to 54 degrees, 51 in Sitka and Petersburg. And our friends there around Wrangell saw temperatures in the 40s and 50s today too. Yakutat was 48, 45 in Cordova, 46 in Valdez, 47 in Seward, 48 for Homer. Kenai showed 55 today, and it was 52 around Anchorage. And this is at 2 o'clock, so chances are it may be a little bit warmer now. Let's see, 56 in Fairbanks, 49 in Healy. Not a bad day to be around the park. And 46 in Eagle, 55 for Northway. Fort Yukon, 54 degrees. Looking northward, it was 39 in Arctic Village, 28 going over Anaktuvuk Pass, and lower 20s for most of the oil fields there from Point Barrow eastward toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, and out around Kupark, 27 around Kaktovik, 29 for Wainwright. And south and west, you can see readings there in the 30s and 40s, 25 around Shishmaref, a little cool there, 40 in Nome, 30 in St. Lawrence Island and around Gamble, 45 for Unalakleet, 53 in Galena. No wonder we're mushing things out, 55 in Tanana, 47 in Bettles, 43 in Ambler. Down toward McGrath, it was 54 degrees, 51 in Bethel, probably a good flying day for you, 36 in Nunivak Island. And around Bristol Bay, 40s and 50s there. Lake Iliamna was 47, but the water's looking beautiful. 40s around the Alaska Peninsula, and also looking at mid to upper 40s around Kodiak Island. Adak showed 41, St. Paul 39, and about the same temperature there around Shemya and Attu Island. Now, as we go into low temperatures tonight, mid to upper 30s for many along the YK Delta and upriver into the upper Kuskokwim, upper 30s for McGrath, into the upper Yukon, 35 degrees there around Fort Yukon, 24 in Eagle. Low 40s for most of southeast Yakutat, 39 degrees. Prince William Sound in the upper 30s. Kodiak looking at 41. Bristol Bay in the mid 30s. Most of the chain in the upper 30s, about 40 in Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. St. Paul down to 33. St. Lawrence Island down to 26 around Gamble and Savunga. 32 in Nome and 12 in Barrow with a high of 19 tomorrow. So not a whole lot of warmer weather coming for you up north for tomorrow afternoon. Highs in the lower 20s for the Beaufort Seacoast, including Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse, and 20s to 30s down the Chukchi Seacoast toward Point Hope and Point Lay. Kotzebue Sound temps back in the 30s tomorrow. Shishmaref still looking a little bit cool. 44 around Nome, and obviously the heat will be back on for the Yukon and the Kuskokwim valleys there, with temps back in the 50s and even lower 60s possible. The Susitna Valley, Talkeetna, you're looking at temps in the upper 50s easily. Cook Inlet region, probably low to mid 50s, including Anchorage down toward Kenai. Homer and Seward, a little bit cooler in the low to mid 50s there. Prince William Sound, mid to upper 40s. Southeast in the lower to mid 50s there. As long as the sun is out, temperatures should be pretty nice as you're getting just a little taste of that stable weather ahead of the next weather maker coming into the Gulf there. Kodiak Island 46, and most areas in the Alaska Peninsula mid 40s and lower 40s for the central and western chain. On to flying weather. MVFR conditions persist for the North Slope, IFR for the northern part of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, and you can see what's building in across the Gulf. We're still dealing with morning MVFR through parts of southeast and Prince William Sound, as well as areas around the eastern Aleutians. IFR conditions are expected to develop around Kodiak Island throughout the day and move northward from the Gulf afternoon into the evening. Of course, with the nights getting longer, this is going to matter more. And as we get into Friday, you'll notice this right up against the coast. Showers and thunderstorms, we'll have to watch for that, and MVFR conditions continue for the North Slope as well as parts of the Pribilofs for the afternoon. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass probably holding around MVFR. Hope for better, but plan for MVFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, as well as Rainy Pass and Windy Pass, all looking to be VFR. Isabel Pass expected to be VFR. Mentasta Pass we expect to see visual flight rule. Same goes for Tanita Pass for your Thursday. Portage Pass holding an MVFR on the eastern side through most of the day, and Chilcoot and White Pass we also expect to see marginal conditions. That elevated pocket of heat is still there. No wonder it's so warm at the surface, with freezing levels already as high as 4,000 feet across the Yukon Valley. The surface freezing line is jumping northward, not having an easy time getting over the surface of the Brooks Range, though, as we saw with those maximum temperatures plotted for tomorrow. It's going to be still a cool day up north. And heat is building into the Gulf. All of this in advance of that low pressure system working into the Gulf heading into Thursday and Friday. Icing potential is wrapping around that next weather maker there. You can already see that banking up against southeast, south central, and parts of southwestern Alaska above 5 to about 7,000 feet. And there is room for some occasional moderate there. Most likely we'll be dealing with light to isolated moderate throughout the bulk of your Thursday, again from the Gulf Coast. And that's really about it for icing potential. The jet stream shows some very highly amplified waves here. The weather moves in waves just like the ocean does. And when you have these really dynamic ups and downs, these huge amplitude waves here, sometimes the weather can move very slowly. And when it does, in this case, we also get into some slow moving and very warm or could be cold weather there that could last for a while. So in this case, for tomorrow, we've got a pretty strong push of southwesterly winds at 150 knots coming over the Gulf, grabbing that weather maker over the Gulf at the surface and zipping it quickly toward the north and northeastern parts of the Gulf. And so all that combined, and with deep tropical connections all the way down into parts of the central Pacific, no wonder it's got a lot of warmth and moisture to work with for periods of moderate to heavy rain. At 9,000 feet, you see our southerlies working across the Gulf, 50 to 60 knots. There's some of those still ramping up into southeast, and those most likely running around 20 to 25 knots tomorrow. Puts on the brakes across the interior, only 5 to as high as 15 knot winds there, wrapping in from the north side, a northeasterly direction, as low pressure sitting around Sand Point. You've got more west and northwesterlies coming across the central and western Aleutians, 35 to as strong as 50 knots out from the west at 9,000 feet. 3,000 feet doesn't look a whole lot different. The wind speeds are a little bit more homogeneous or the same across central and eastern parts of the Gulf, 40 to 45 knots in most areas there. They slow down again across the interior, 10 to 15 knots, generally southerlies for the central and eastern interior. The west coast looking at 10 to as strong as 20 to 30 knots there across our southwestern capes. Northeasterlies across the Chukchi Sea, westerlies across the Beaufort Sea, and we get into our ridge trying to build in here from the west and southwest at 45 to 50 knots. Turbulence potential then, anywhere we have convection and thunderstorm activity, that's implied turbulence for pilots. Anywhere below 3,000 to 5,000 feet, watch for occasional moderate there across the Gulf, and this is going to get worse as we head into Friday, especially around the Copper River Basin to about Yakutat. So plan on some rough and tumble perhaps across northern parts of the Gulf heading into Friday and Saturday, below 3,000 to about 5,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a sea ice update and of course your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the Sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the Sun doesn't stay at the Sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the Sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the Sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Time for your sea ice update, and as you would expect, with a mush out of the rivers, continues the mush out of the northern Bering Sea. A lot more blue on the map today, which indicates sea ice concentrations of under 80%. That could go as low as 0%, of course, and that's where we start to see the open water in the Gulf of Anadyr, south of St. Lawrence Island, in Norton Sound, and along the Yukon coast. Anything in white's 80% or higher, and we still have a decent pack north of the Bering Strait, but you can see some changes there around the Chukchi Seacoast from Barrow all the way down to Wainwright. Some of that could be open, but there's considerably more open areas, of course, in the northern Bering Sea. Now, for those of you looking at areas north of St. Lawrence Island up toward the Bering Strait, consider those concentrations and movement of the ice carefully, as a lot of what you're looking at is unstable. So consult the forecast carefully, and you can do that easily, anyone, anytime, at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. The weather in southeast is going to change as we head into Thursday, Friday, and of course onward into the weekend. You'll see some of those changes in the south central maps as well. For the inside waters, look for seas coming up to about 2 feet in Clarence Strait, but the further north you go, more changes will be seen into the Lynn Canal with southerlies at 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. The outer coast, 25 to 35 with seas ranging from 7 feet outside of the Dixon entrance to 10 feet up north toward Icy Cape. Look for higher gusts in those areas. For Friday, look for more uniform winds, 25 to 30, even 35 knots outside of Craig. Seas ranging from 11 to 12 feet on the outside. On the inside, seas could range from 4 to about 6 feet with the highest around the Lynn Canal, with winds there from the south at 30 knots. Look for 4-foot seas in the Clarence Strait and around Stevens Passage and other of the regions there, 30 knots with a southerly flow. Around 5-foot seas are expected. For Thursday, stronger northeasterly winds coming down Cook Inlet are expected. They'll really pick up west of the Barents and into the Shelikof Strait region at 40 knots. 10 to 16-foot seas there are expected to develop, and there will be higher gusts in the region. Same goes for the Copper River Delta area and wrapping into the north and western Gulf. Seas ranging from 13 to 14 feet on winds at least at 40 to 45. Inside Prince William Sound, 25 knots with a 6-foot sea. Those will come down to about 20 knots with 3-foot seas on Friday. Still looking at southerlies outside of the Middleton Island region and into the northern Gulf. And then we got stronger easterlies at 40 knots. Southeasterlies start to fall off behind that front quickly to 15 to 20 knots there over the Barrens, and more of a variable and diminishing flow in Shelikof Strait, seas down to 2 feet, and 15 knot winds coming down Cook Inlet, still from the north and northeast. Seas still up around 3 to 4 feet on Friday. Inside Bristol Bay, northeasterlies at 25 with a 4-foot sea. 35 knot winds there on the Pacific coast with 8 to 10-foot seas. Northerlies down the Bering Sea coast with a 6-foot sea on Thursday. For Friday, winds diminish across the Bristol Bay region. Northwesterlies continue across the Alaska Peninsula. 9 to 10-foot seas there, and northerlies from Castle Cape to Chignik with a 10-foot sea continuing. Across the Aleutians, most areas around 20 to 30 knots. North and northwesterly winds across the central and eastern chain. Developing southwesterly flow from Kiska to Attu. 30 knots with a 9-foot sea there on Thursday. By Friday, that comes up even more to 12-foot seas. 30 knots from the south and west are expected there, and some of that will reach into the central chain. The eastern chain, 25 to 30 knots, more of a westerly flow there with 8 to 9-foot seas to wrap up the week. Across the west coast, 15 to 20 knots there from St. Lawrence Island down toward the Kuskokwim Delta. 3 to about 4-foot seas are expected in most areas. 7-foot seas around St. Paul and St. George with 25 knot winds from the north. Those will diminish from the west at 15 knots by Friday, and north and northwesterly winds still coming down the west coast at 15 to 20 with 3 to 5-foot seas there. 2-foot seas around St. Matthew in the open water. For the north slope, light winds there from Point Barrow to Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, only 5 knots or so. Northwesterlies over the ice around Kaktovik. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi Sea up to about 10 to 15 knots on Thursday. By Friday, you'll see slightly stronger winds from the east around Barrow and over the Beaufort Seacoast, 15 knots there. Northeasterlies continue for the Chukchi Sea, and outside of Kotzebue Sound, expect 10-knot winds from the north. Recapping tonight's weather, rain is moving back in across the northern and eastern Gulf Coast. That will spread eastward as we go into Friday and Saturday. Some of this could be heavy rain. Showers and thunderstorms that are ongoing now across the Yukon and even Kuskokwim Valley will likely diminish quickly again tonight, but they'll be back again tomorrow in widely scattered fashion. Watch for a fast-moving storm to move into the northern Gulf as we head into Friday and linger there as we go into Saturday. And new storms coming in from the west as we close out the week. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.